Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava, page 29b, starting at the top with the words Rabbi Yochanan Amar La'achar Nefila Machlokas. Rabbi Yochanan says the dispute is with regard to a situation where the damage occurred after the fall. The Gemara asks, but at the time of the person's fall, according to this statement, what is the halacha? Does everyone agree that the owner of the jug is exempt from liability? But from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says later, 31a, with regard to another Mishnah in this chapter, do not say that the Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that one who stumbles is considered negligent. By inference, it is clear that he holds that Rabbi Meir deems one who stumbles liable to pay damages. Evidently, it is not unanimously agreed upon that he is exempt. Rather, what is the halacha in this case? Does he say that everyone agrees that he is liable? From the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says later, do not say that the Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that one who stumbles is considered negligent. By inference, it is clear that he holds that the rabbis deem him exempt. The Gemara answers, rather, this is what Rabbi Yochanan teaches us, that the circumstance in which the rabbis deem one who renounces ownership of his hazardous property exempt is only the situation stated here. In other words, where he stumbled, as he is the victim of circumstances beyond his control. But in the general case of one who renounces ownership of his hazardous property, they deem him liable to pay for damage caused by it. It was stated, with regard to one who renounces ownership of his hazardous property, that he left in the public domain. There is a dispute between the Amoraim, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar. One said that he is liable, and one said that he is exempt. The Gemara suggests, shall we say that the one who deems him liable holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and the one who deems him exempt holds in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis? The Gemara responds, no. In accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, everyone agrees that one who renounces ownership over his hazardous property is liable. Rather, when they disagree, is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis. They disagree as to what the opinion of the rabbis is. The one who deems him exempt holds that his opinion is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis. And the one who deems him liable could have said to you, I maintain that what I say is correct, even according to the opinion of the rabbis. The rabbis deem one who renounces ownership over his hazardous property exempt only in the situation here, because he is a victim of circumstances beyond his control. But in a general case of one who renounces ownership of his hazardous property, they deem him liable. The Gemara suggests it may be concluded that Rabbi Elazar is the one who says that he is liable. As Rabbi Elazar says, in the name of Rabbi Ishmael, there are two entities that are not in a person's legal possession, and nevertheless the verse rendered them as though they were in his possession with regard to certain halachic responsibilities. And these are a pit that he dug in the public domain, and leavened bread remaining in his possession on the eve of Passover from 6 hours and onward. It may be concluded that Rabbi Elazar is the one who says that he is liable. The Gemara asks, and did Rabbi Elazar actually say this? That one who renounces ownership of his hazardous objects is liable? But didn't Rabbi Elazar say the opposite? As we learned in the Mishnah in 30a, in the case of one who turns over dung in the public domain, and another person incurred damage due to it, he is liable to pay for his damage. And Rabbi Elazar says they taught this ruling only in a case where the one who had turned over the dung intended to acquire it. But in a case where he did not intend to acquire it, he is exempt. Apparently, according to Rabbi Elazar, one who renounces ownership of his hazardous property is exempt, since he is liable only if he intends to take possession of the dung, even if he moved it significantly. Rav Ada bar Ahava said, Rabbi Elazar was referring to a case where he returned the dung to its prior place. Therefore, he is exempt unless he intended to acquire it. Ravina said this can be explained by means of a parable. To what is the statement of Rav Ada bar Ahava comparable? To one who finds an uncovered pit in the public domain and covers it, and then uncovers it again. Since he left the pit as he found it, he is exempt from paying damages, and the liability lies with the one who dug the pit. Mar Zutra, the son of Rav Mari, says Ravina, is this comparable? There, in the case of the pit, the result of the initial act of digging the pit was not removed, since even when he covered the pit itself still existed. But here, the result of the initial act was removed. Since once the dung was moved from its prior place, there was no longer any hazardous object there. Therefore, by returning it to its place, the hazard is created anew. Rather, it is comparable only to one who finds an uncovered pit and fills it with dirt and then digs it up again, as in this case the result of the initial act is removed and the new pit therefore exists in his possession and he is liable. Likewise, one who moves dung in the public domain and then restores it to its prior place is deemed liable whether or not he intends to acquire it. Rather, Rav Ashi said in the name of Rabbi Elazar was referring to a case where he turns it over at a height of less than 3 handbreadths, which is not considered removal of the dung from its place. The Gemara asks, but according to this explanation, what forced Rabbi Elazar to interpret the Mishnah as referring specifically to the unique case where he turned over the dung at a height of less than 3 handbreadths? And consequently, the reason is he is liable is that he intended to acquire it, but if he does not intend to acquire it, he is not liable. Let him interpret the Mishnah as referring to a case where he turned over the dung at a height above 3 handbreadths, in which case he did not intend to acquire it. He is liable. Rava said, what forced him was that the Mishnah was difficult for him. Why does it state specifically that he turned over the dung? Let it teach that he lifted the dung. Rather, learn from the fact that the Mishnah did not use the term lifted, which generally is referring to the act of lifting an object 3 handbreadths for the purpose of acquisition, that whenever the term turned over is used, it is referring to an act in which the object is lifted to a height of under 3 handbreadths from the ground. The Gemara concludes, and from the fact that Rabbi Elazar was evidently the one who said that the one who renounces ownership of his hazardous object in the public domain is still liable to pay for any damage it causes, Rabbi Yochanan is clearly the one who said he is exempt. The Gemara asks, and did Rabbi Yochanan actually say this? That if one renounces ownership of his object, he is exempt from liability for any damage it causes? But didn't we learn in a Mishnah 30a with regard to one who conceals a thorn or a piece of glass, or who puts up a fence of thorns, or who puts up a fence that subsequently fell into the public domain, and another person incurred damage due to any of these, he is liable to pay for this person's damage? And Rabbi Yochanan says, with regard to one who puts up a fence of thorns, they taught that he is liable only in a case where he projects the thorns out into the public domain. But in a case where he restricts them to his own property, he is exempt. The Gemara infers, in a case where he restricts them, what is the reason that he is exempt? Is it not because it is considered a pit on his own property? By inference, the liability in the category a pit, according to Rabbi Yochanan, is in the public domain, where a pit generally does not belong to the one who dug it. Apparently, Rabbi Yochanan holds that one who renounces ownership of his hazardous property is liable. The Gemara answers, no. Actually, I could say to you that in principle, one who renounces ownership of his hazardous property is exempt. Nevertheless, One who puts up a fence of thorns is liable because he does not renounce ownership of the thorns that protrude into the public domain. And in a case where he restricts the thorns to his own property, what is the reason he is exempt? The reason is not that he is not able to pay for the damage of a pit in his own property, but rather because it was stated about this case that Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, said, he is exempt because it is not the typical manner of people to rub against walls, but to keep a small distance from them. Therefore, if a pedestrian is injured by the thorns, it is considered an unusual accident for which the owner of the fence is not liable. The Gemara asks, and did Rabbi Yochanan actually say that the one who renounces ownership of his hazardous objects is exempt? But did Rabbi Yochanan say that in general the halacha is in accordance with an unattributed Mishnah? A Stam Mishnah, we learned in an unattributed Mishnah, 50b, in the case of one who digs a pit in the public domain, and an ox or a donkey fell into it and died, he is liable. This Mishnah is referring to one who digs a pit in the public domain, where it is not owned by the one who dug it. Yet the Mishnah deems him liable. The Gemara concludes, rather Rabbi Yochanan is actually the one who said that one who renounces ownership of his hazardous objects is liable. The Gemara asks, and from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan said that he is liable, is it evident that Rabbi Elazar said that he is exempt? But doesn't Rabbi Elazar say